Today I wanted to cover with you some verses from the Quran. Verses that are so powerful. Verses that should be memorized by every one of us. Some of our great scholars have called them verses of optimism. Verses that raise our spirits. Verses that uplift our hearts. These are the verses that you and I will need to recall in times of difficulty, in times of stress, in moments of crisis. You see, the reality of life is that one thing is absolutely certain. Difficulty and struggle are part and parcel of our existence. This world was never designed to be free of hardship. No human being, listen carefully, no human being is living a Jannah on earth. It may appear to you at first glance that a certain person is living in ease. You might see them possessing something that you do not have. And you might think to yourself, wow, that person has everything. But the reality is very different. Every single human being, without exception, is struggling in some way, in some form, in some manner. Now, I'm not saying that everyone's struggle is the same. No, not at all. There is no doubt that the one who is living under the constant fear of bombs dropping upon their heads, the one whose family has been torn apart, the one who has lost children, may Allah Almighty protect us all. There is no doubt that this is an entirely different level of difficulty. But even then, nobody is living a life of complete paradise on this earth. Why? Because this world was never meant to be Jannah. This world is meant to be a place of trials, a place of testing, a place of tribulation. And so the wealthy person is being tested in his own way, while the one who is poor is being tested in another way. The one who has a family is being tested with that family, and the one who has no family is being tested with loneliness. Each and every one of us is being tested in life. That is the reality. That is what life is all about. But the mercy of Allah is such that He has revealed to us verses in the Quran, verses that can lift us, verses that can strengthen us, verses that can give us hope. And that is why we must memorize them, so that whenever we are faced with a difficulty, we can recite them, reflect upon them, and find comfort within them. I will mention some of these verses. Obviously, time is always limited, but I want to share a selection with you, and then inshallah I will conclude with what I like to call the verse of optimism. A verse that brings us back to a spiritual reminder. A verse that connects our hearts to Allah in the most beautiful way. But before we get there, I want to begin with verses of optimism from a worldly perspective. Verses that speak to us when we are facing worldly problems. Verses that remind us to remain optimistic, to never lose hope, and to keep going no matter what challenges lie ahead. My brothers and sisters, the very first verse I want to begin with is one that all of you already know. It is a rule that Allah Almighty reminds us of in the Quran, a principle that we should all memorize and engrave in our hearts. What is that rule? It is that Allah never sends down a difficulty except that along with that difficulty He sends down an ease. Subhanallah. What a powerful reminder from our Creator. Notice carefully how Allah words this verse. He tells us that with the same difficulty comes an ease, and then in the very next line, Allah says again, with the same difficulty, there is another ease. The scholars have explained this so beautifully. They say, never will one single difficulty overpower two or more forms of ease. Never. The ease will always outweigh the difficulty. The ease will always win. And here, the Arabic is very precise. Allah uses a wording that indicates it is not after the difficulty, but with the difficulty. The here and the then is without delay. At the very same time that the difficulty descends, the ease is also descending. The same difficulty that you are facing, Allah promises He will pair it with multiple forms of ease. So if you're struggling financially, Allah is telling you, don't worry, your health is in good shape. If you are struggling with a health issue, Allah is reminding you, you still have the blessing of a loving family. If you are experiencing a problem within your family, Allah is telling you, society and the community around you is at peace. In other words, whatever the nature of your difficulty may be, Allah is saying to you, my servant, I will give you multiple eases. I will give you other aspects of your life that are smooth, that are manageable, that are a source of comfort, even as you are tested in this one matter. So take this verse as a verse of optimism. Hold it close to your heart. The next time you face a challenge, remind yourself of this principle from Allah Himself. Never does He send down a single difficulty without pairing it with multiple forms of ease. Subhanallah. What a gift of hope, what a gift of comfort, and what a gift of optimism from our Rabb. My brothers and sisters, the second verse of optimism, again, we all know it. These are basic reminders, but they are so powerful that we need to commit them to memory. Why? Because when a problem comes, when a financial issue arises, when a family crisis unfolds, we need to remind ourselves of these verses. We need to anchor ourselves in the words of Allah. The second verse says, and I'm sure you've heard it many times, no soul will ever be burdened with more than it can bear. Subhanallah. This is not just a statement. This is a rule. This is a law of the Quran. These are the rules of creation that Allah Himself has laid down. What this verse means. Sometimes when we are overwhelmed, when we are crushed under the weight of our struggles, we say to ourselves, I cannot handle this. It is too much for me. The struggle is unbearable. I don't have the strength within me to deal with this. And to such a person, we remind them, your Creator knows you better than you know yourself. Allah knows you have it in you to overcome this trial. You might not trust yourself. You might not believe in yourself, but Allah, your Maker, trusts you. Allah knows that you can do it. In fact, the very fact that you are facing this particular trial is proof that you have what it takes to handle it. If you truly did not have the strength, the capacity, the ability, Allah would never have placed this burden upon your shoulders. It is as simple as that. So when you are going through something heavy, remember, Allah has already declared that He does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear. That means your struggle, your hardship, your difficulty, it is tailored to your strength. Allah knows you have the courage. Allah knows you have the fortitude. Allah knows you have the iman. Allah knows you have both the inner capacity and the external willpower to get through it. And that is why He chose you for this test. That is why He placed this particular burden upon you. If Allah knew you couldn't face it, you wouldn't even be facing it in the first place. Subhanallah, what a powerful way to look at life. So my brothers and sisters, trust in Allah. Trust that He knows you better than you know yourself. If you feel like you can't do it, remind yourself that Allah already knows you can. And in this sense, it is almost as though Allah is placing His trust in you, that you will rise, that you will overcome, that you will pass this test. You see the point? Allah knows you can do it. And if Allah knows it, then surely you can. So this is the second verse of optimism. It is a reminder that no matter what trial you are facing, no matter how heavy, no matter how impossible the situation may seem, Allah knows that within you there is enough. There are resources inside of you, and there are resources around you for you to overcome that struggle. And if you turn to Allah, you will always come out as the victor. Subhanallah. Never does a calamity happen to a believer. Never does a tragedy strike a believer, except that at the end of it, the believer is the victor. That is the promise of Allah. Now, does this mean that the calamity itself disappears? No, not necessarily. If you have lost a loved one, the reality is that your loved one will not come back. That is the decree of Allah. If you have lost wealth, that particular wealth may not return. The test remains. But what this means is that your internal